Okay, thank you all for finding your seats. That was our last break of the day, so if you need to use the restroom, it's too late. We're barricading the doors, and you're stuck in here till dinner. Just kidding. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Nick Mendoza, and I'm the new president of the board of the Quivira Coalition. I was actually a staff member 2 years ago before leaving to found my snack food company, One for Neptune, which makes healthy, sustainable fish jerky. So I'm thrilled to be back in this community, planting deeper roots with this community that means a lot to all of us. It is my pleasure to announce the final session, which is titled Soil, Land, and the Human Health Connection. Our first speaker is Cory Carman. Cory grew up in the isolated mountains of northeastern Oregon as a fourth-generation cattle rancher. She's Stanford educated, and in 2003, returned to the family farm to start Carman Ranch Provisions, a company focused on finding market outlets for the livestock raised in manners that build soil health. In her talk, you'll hear about how the brand has grown in the Northwest by bringing together stakeholders around the core values of building a new type of food system that can sequester carbon, improve nutrient density in food, and support rural communities. Second, you'll hear from Grant and Dawn Breitkreutz. Together they run Stony Creek Farm near Redwood Falls, Minnesota. Over the last 20 years, they've converted a conventional crop cow-calf operation into a multi-enterprise regenerative family business through a 100% no-till cropping system with 3 or more crop rotations, cover crops, and adaptive grazing. Grant and Dawn have also added a direct marketing enterprise to their business with their daughter and son-in-law, Carly and Cody, working to heal the land and build a beautiful legacy into the future. So I'll now welcome Cory to the stage to speak. Actually, Grant and Dawn.
So we are really humbled to be invited to speak here at Regenerate 2019. We are following such knowledgeable and notorious speakers from across the country who have been very eloquent about regenerative ag, and we probably should just sit down and call it good, but we are asked to tell our story, so here we go.
So we're in southwestern Minnesota. Obviously not as brittle of an environment as we are here. Dawn and I got the opportunity to take over the farm in 1997 from my parents. We were a conventional farm with a cow-calf operation and a feedlot, but we always struggled. We enjoyed the cattle, we loved the cattle, and we were always out of grass. And it was like, why can't we feed 58 cows on 160 acres of pasture land? So our goal and challenge as we started out was to increase our cow herd because Dawn hated working in town, and obviously we were running out of feed all the time. So for our operation, we actually learned about soil health first through our grazing enterprise through our cattle. So as this journey continues, we've learned a lot along the way, and our goal here is to share it with you. And the first thing I wanted to start with was the goal is to convert the mind, as Ray says. And this is something that we never envisioned as we started down this path, that you had to address it with the mind first, actually. Our operation sits in the Minnesota River Valley. At the time we started, there was probably about 35 cow-calf producers in this valley. We worked directly with 7 of them. When we started doing managed grazing, after a couple of years, we were no longer working with these 7 producers because we got tired of hearing, you're leaving too much grass. You should have cut that for hay first before you put the cows out there. You know, so that really opened my eyes to it's a mind thing that we had to get through. But as human beings, the other side of it is, as we changed our operation and as you changed yours or thinking about changing them, 2 of the hardest things to do as a human being is to accept change. And as you accept change on your ranches and farms, in a way you're admitting you're wrong, which is the second hardest thing I believe is to do as a human being. So we started, like I said, with managed grazing. It was called all different things at the time we started, and being in the area we were in, we had a tough time finding anybody that could teach us, so we found holistic management to help us out with some of the training. We're a very wet environment, so we could see improvements very quickly. This is an older picture of ours, but when we started out, we only had 4 species of grass basically on our farm. We could never get it to grow over boot high and knee high at the best. And through our pasture management, obviously we're at over 30 species now, since anybody was out there and last counted, but we're producing, on our home farm, we could run 58 cows for basically 3.5 months. Right now we run 120 cows for 6 months. In our wet environment, we could really see change fast. Obviously, the first part of that was water installation. We went in some very remote places in the river valley.
That water installation has been really key, and that the water is still one of our biggest stumbling blocks, especially in the wintertime. All of that is above ground, and right now we're short on winter water, so it's something that we're working really hard to rectify. This particular field used to be a row crop field, and probably 7 out of 10 years, if we look back in the records, we collected crop insurance on it because it was a failure. It's rocky, it's light, it just wasn't working out for us. So we decided we were going to rest it by planting alfalfa to it for at least 5 years. And as that transitioned over those years, we started seeing some of the grasses coming, and Grant had read quite a bit about managing something and converting something with livestock. And so we decided we were going to take a big risk. This was a huge risk to us, and we were going to convert this field without seeding anything, using our cattle and managing our cattle. And now, through that management, it is one of our most productive pieces of land, and it's the one that we probably beat up the worst. But we've learned that diversity and that all the pulsing of how we manage it has made it really profitable for us.
This was one of the things that I could never understand, latent seed bank. We never planted anything out here but alfalfa, so it's real, it works. There's a lot of stuff on here about the grazing diversity and altering things, and that's the one thing we learned as we went through this path, is to alter everything we do, whether it's density, rotation patterns, heights, rest periods. Overgrazing, it happens to us. We've been dealing with massive, massive amounts of water up in our region, 40 plus inches of rain every growing season for the last 4 years. There's paddocks we can't use, so we're overgrazing, but we know we have to adjust and alter everything. So, like I said in the opening, initially we couldn't even grow grass this tall. Now this is the way we leave everything at the end of the season, because we realize the importance of it and how important it is to the soil health. Obviously there's a lot of results from what we've done over the years in changing our things. And there's a lot of them listed up here, but this is about health. And the first thing that we started noticing was vet savings, death loss. In our previous system with, well, at that time it was about 86 cow-calf pairs in a feedlot, our vet bills were $10,000 to $12,000 a year. Once we fixed the soil health in the land, improved things that way, it was directly showing up in our cattle, and we weren't realizing it until we looked at the end of the year stuff. And like right now, running 200 mama cows and the feedlot, our vet bills are about $3,500 a year, which most of that is vaccines we haven't chose to give up yet. So as we improve the health of everything, it reduced the input costs. So if we can make this happen in our grazing system and on our pasture land, obviously we're row croppers up in our country yet. Corn, soybeans, and our neighbors have sugar beets, but can it work on our croplands? Can the same principles work on our croplands? And it comes down to the 6 principles that you've all seen. Obviously, keep the soil covered. We learned that in the pastures. Minimize the disturbance, so we switched to no-till in our cropping operation. increased the diversity. We cover crop everything all the time. We've increased the different species of crops that we grow, keep the living roots in the soil all the time. Right now, my son-in-law is still seeding cover crops in Minnesota. We were froze up rock hard solid, it thawed out, and he's been in the drill ever since we got on the airplane. Integrate livestock, which is obviously easy for us that have livestock. But the biggest one is the context. As we made these changes, we didn't realize that it was all in the context of how it fits your ranch or farming operation. Like I said, we're in corn, soybean, and sugar beet country. This is southwestern Minnesota. This was 4 years consecutive in the spring. We talk about health, air quality, soil health, animal health. We had a lot of problems, being we're one of the few livestock operations in our area keeping our cattle healthy when they're breathing air like this for 3 weeks straight every spring. This picture's taken at 9:30 in the morning and we're coming home from church. The wind just got worse after this.
So when Grant told me the story about this field, the word that popped into my mind was annihilation. And so I looked it up in the dictionary, and that was the definition that I came up with, and it perfectly describes what happened to this piece of ground. This is not ours, this is within our neighborhood. And Ray's phrase really fits this, and I'm gonna let him quickly tell the story behind this field.
So obviously in row crop country, everybody thinks we gotta dry the soil out, we gotta have it black so it can warm up. This particular field was tilled 6 times in the fall going into winter. I did not understand it, we did not understand it, but just to show you what we see in our area. But this is the difference between our practices and theirs. You can see we've got aggregate structure in our soil. Obviously the soil's gonna function, it's healthy. There didn't happen to be any earthworms in there, but you can see what our neighbors are. And the health of all of this comes back to everything we're dealing with in this country. The flooding that we're dealing with, especially for us up in our area, and we're on the Mississippi River, so we're blasting everybody else out. We've got water infiltration rates in our farm of 8 to 30 inches per hour. Our neighbors in the bottom right there, less than an inch in every single field we check. And this shows it. This is fence line to fence line on our row crops. That was one of the most perfect rains we've had in the last 4 years. This was taken in May. We had 1 3/10 inches of rain over 3 hours and 15 minutes. And that's what we deal with in our country, is the water sitting after a beautiful rain like that from all the tillage that happens in our area. So this was pretty neat. I had Dr. Alan Williams up at our farm to do a field day a couple years ago, and I said, Alan, he was tired, he just got off the plane. I said, we gotta go for a little drive quick. This is how we're solving the problem in production agriculture in our area. There currently was a tile line in between every one of these tile lines you see. They couldn't get through here. They buried a combine in there that sat there for 3 weeks, and when they were done, it was junk when they finally got it out. So they put more tile in. Yet we farm right beside them. We've never left a rut. We haven't had a combine or piece of equipment stuck in 4 years once we fixed our soil health. Obviously we use cover crops and rooting. We learned this in the pasture, that once the different species came back in our pasture, the different roots all serve a purpose. Here we're showing 30-inch roots out in our fields, obviously 10 and 17-inch roots. We use different cover crops during our growing season, after our cash grains, during our cash grains, obviously to do all these different things.
And there too, you can see how we've changed our soil profile.
Yeah, so we were having this discussion at our table. When I dug this root pit, Grant's not very smart. As he's sitting in the backhoe, he realized that the county had rebladed the road, reconstructed the road in this area. So this is 10 years after all that soil was disturbed by road construction equipment. You can see we basically have rebuilt 16 inches of perfect black topsoil. And we're seeing this all over our farm. In our area, corn, soybeans, nobody wants to put a cereal grain crop back in the rotation. We've always had it in there. And all my neighbors say it doesn't pay, and even the neighbors that have cows. But this is after we took a spring wheat crop off. This is in late October. You can see the biomass we produce there and the rainfall we get. But I just wanted to cover this just a little bit, and it's not so much about the dollars and cents of this, but it's what happened after we fixed our soil, once we had the soil health back. And this is part of it. We can show that we can financially make gains here, and it needs to be looked at for more than 1 year as we look at fixing soil health. Bankers ask us just to go January 1 to January 1 so we can show them a net gain of $127 an acre in our environment, basically all in cow feed. But when we're in row crop production, we can show extended gains farther out, to the tune of, I think we just updated this shortly ago, but for our operation, about $239 an acre net. And guys by us can't make break even, and we can show another $239 an acre net by changing the way they farm. This is what we do in our row cropping. I was challenged. They said you can't plant corn green. That just makes Grant do stupid things and prove everybody he can. So this is how we plant most of our crops now, compared to our neighbors in black soil. This is another issue now. We no longer have rain days. We do our row cropping. After the rain quits, we can basically do anything but plant or seed another crop. If we have to spray, fertilize, whatever we're doing. This is after 4/10 of an inch of rain. But the key, one of the 6 principles, is keep a living root in the soil all the time, and that's what we do. We're interseeding here. We took a piece of equipment, made it work for ourselves. This is what it looks like. In fact, right now, my dad and daughter are combining corn, and this is what it looks like as they're combining corn. The corn's dead, but we still got the living root in the soil. We fixed the soil health, fixed the water infiltration. Obviously here we couldn't get it all infiltrated, but we're chopping silage after 4.8 inches of rain when none of our neighbors moved for 5 days. This is what we do for fall tillage now, and my son-in-law is out there right now doing this. We're seeding another cover crop to get a living root in the soil. Diversity. This is what we learned in the pasture after we got everything to come back there. Diversity is a thing that we use a lot in our operation. This was a 14 species cover crop after a forage crop was taken. We've been fence line weaning for a long time, but we were fence line weaning into bunks, and then we realized that if we kept that calf grazing what the mama cow's taught it to do its whole life, it just made weaning a lot better. We haven't pulled the calf in years at weaning time because they're doing what their mother cow taught them to do. In Minnesota, this is becoming a huge deal, clean water, and obviously right south of us is the big lawsuit with the Des Moines watershed and the drinking water. This is one of our cricks that we see. We're blessed in the state of Minnesota that our Department of Agriculture saw that this was important, and they started a water quality certification program. We made it through this certification in 45 minutes, unlike our neighbors, it takes 4 hours.
This is mine. When this happened, that slide on the right, it just made me think of this phrase, and I've heard it from somebody else. But we had a lot of pride in fixing our riparian areas, and we had this creek fixed. And after one rain event in April this spring, it has torn out the creek, and it's also torn out our fences along there. We had it all rotationally fenced and stuff, and it just makes me mad. This is avoidable, and we need to be able to do better than that, and we all need to take responsibility for it.
Yeah, it's this water is not coming off of our land. This is coming from our neighbors, so we all need to work at this together. Obviously, in Minnesota, the two rivers come together. I mean, we got to do better than this. And this picture can be taken all the time. If you build it, they will come. Ian Mitchell Innes taught us this a long time ago.
This Bible phrase was something that was introduced to us earlier this year, and it just really hit home for us, just because we didn't realize, what our actions were, and it just kind of all puts it in context for us, and it's really special to us.
So this is something that Dawn and I could never figure out as we were going through this. How do we monitor this? And so we started looking at soil health by earthworms. And then after years and years of doing this, now this is what we see. We see endangered species on our land all the time. We obviously don't tell anybody. We see birds all the time. We see pollinators. All the buzzwords that are in politics right now, once we fix the soil health, it all came back to our farm. Right now we're dealing with a herd of 90 deer on 160 acres already, and it's not winter in Minnesota. We can't stockpile anything anymore for our cows to calve on. We get devastated by wildlife. But at the same time, we're charging a lot of money for hunting. So there's benefits to it all, but it all comes back to the health of the soil, and obviously healthy soil produces stuff that wildlife naturally comes to. One of our goals on our farm now is education. I firmly believe that we as producers, this has been mentioned before, we need to educate everybody. Producer to producer, to the consumers, we have got to educate everybody. So this is a Minnesota Soil Health team that's out at our farm. They keep coming back year after year for 7 years. It's just amazing watching those kids as they come to the farm to see what kind of soils we have produced.
So just to add to this, as we have journeyed down our path, we've come to realize we aren't just stomping across the land, and it's not something that we need to conquer. We need to cherish our relationship with nature, the nature that we are stewarding, and we are really humbled by the lessons that we're learning.
So God's blessed all of us with this life, and we must leave the land in better condition for our generations to come. This is our next generation that's coming up. It's our daughter and son-in-law and the 3 daughters, and they brought the idea of adding another enterprise to our farm. So the kids are in charge of our direct marketing of beef and pork for right now. They're going to add poultry next year and keep expanding it. So thank you for now.
I'm Cory Carman, and I came to Quivira, I think 11 years ago for the first time, and all my heroes were in the room, and it's a decade later, and all my heroes are in the room, and a lot of young people, so really happy to be on stage. So my journey in soil health and making that connection to food really started in my family ranch. See if I can figure out how to use this. And I came back to the family ranch in 2003. As many people in this room know, there's this huge privilege in having a multi-generational farmer ranch, and there's also a huge responsibility. You don't want to be the generation that blows it. And I was really excited about grass-fed beef. Even though I had never really had it before or knew anything about raising it. My family, when I came back, was not. They did not think that that was really the direction that we should go. But I was the only one that came back, so they didn't have a lot of choice. And I knew that if we were going to have great grass-fed beef, we really needed great grass. And we were in the seed stock industry when I was growing up, and we talked a lot about cows and genetics, but we really didn't spend a lot of time talking about grass. So I started with ranching for profit, and then I took my first holistic management class when my twins were babies, and they're 12 now. So we spent those first years just really trying to increase our rest periods and put our herd back together instead of having all the herds spread out with different bulls. It was not good for our seed stock program, but I wanted to raise grass-fed beef. So, and then we started a meat company. We sold beef and pork, and we sold mostly cow shares in the beginning. Over time, we built up to about 300 families in Portland every year that were ordering from us. And from a financial standpoint, it worked, but it was kind of lonely. And when I started to think about, what is sustainability and what are we trying to do here, having your neighbors constantly looking over the fence, critiquing everything that you're doing because it's different, to me didn't feel like it was sustainable. And I also had this notion that, we were working so hard to create change on the ground, and I know many people here have done this. And And if that change is going to persist beyond your generation, if it's something that your kids or other young people are going to be excited about, it's pretty ephemeral if there isn't a fabric or a community or even a market to support those values that you're trying to execute on the land. So I decided that I wanted to build the meat company to be something larger and to create a community of people that were organized around some of these same values. And we started out with a seasonal program just in the Wallowa Valley, which I guess I didn't say is where I'm from, and that's a very northeastern part of Oregon on the Idaho-Washington border. So you can see it's kind of pretty over there. This was, when I first did this sort of 6-7 years into being home, we were really starting to talk about soil health, but it felt like, silly, but it felt new, right? That we were all having conversations around, it was during the drought, we were all having conversations around putting carbon in soil, about water infiltration. And we were trying to figure out how to bring that to the grass-fed beef world. And it really was a farmer that approached me about, as we were growing the grass-fed beef sales, about finishing cattle for me. And that, having a farmer in the room, has kind of changed everything. And we realized that through all the years of practicing holistic management or working towards holistic management goals, we could take similar principles, and Grant and Don covered these already, and start to look at cropping systems in conjunction with our rangeland systems. And the results we saw in those early trials of cover cropping and doing a livestock rotation were pretty impressive. You can see, this is a classic picture in my life, all the ranchers looking at the farmer as on a cover cropping field. And he saw immediately an increase in productivity from a crop standpoint, but what was really critical is he saw that prolonged productivity. So in subsequent years after a livestock rotation and what would for him normally be a wheat rotation, he saw 30% increased yield in subsequent hay crops. So he saw the value of including livestock, and then for us, we of course saw the value in the increased forage availability, increased forage quality. But at the end of the day, there was just, to try to grow this, there was so much to learn. And I think we're all facing that in the sense that, is it a warm season? Is it a cool season? Which things are going to be most palatable to the cattle in your specific growing environment? Which species of cover crops do you use? So many questions. And when you're doing it on really small scale, it takes a long time to learn. So I wanted to grow beyond, I wanted to be able to make meaningful opportunities for farmers and ranchers to learn this stuff, to make an impact on the ground using livestock. And with the cover cropping introduction, all of a sudden we could start to imagine a year-round supply because our growing season was extending through the cover crops and because we had higher forage quality and more weight gain. And so we wanted to sell to grocery stores because at the end of the day, that's where a lot of people still buy their meat. Our core group works together. So now we've grown outside of just my little community of Wallowa. And we are in Northern California, Nevada, Washington, and Oregon. So there's this core group of about 8 producers, and they are all organized around the principles of soil health. And some of them are farmers, most of them are ranchers that are incorporating some amount of farmland, and some people are just using holistic management on irrigated pastures. But everybody really understands that there is this deep connection between soil health, carbon sequestration, human health, beef quality, water infiltration, and rural economic development. And in some ways, for me, it's been this interesting change because I came home to ranch, and I built the beef business to support my ranch, and now I run the beef business, and I don't spend a lot of time on the ranch. And I could talk for hours about the challenges of the meat business, as I know a lot of other people in this room could, and I'm happy to if anybody wants to talk to me about it. But I think the main point in this is that the beef business has been a vehicle to create a group of people that are working together and supporting each other in learning about soil health. And that's the community that I wished for when I came home, and that's the community that we're starting to build. And I think the last piece of that, and this is where we are today, is we've taken that initial group of ranchers. We meet twice a year. We're having conversations about what other people are doing. We're learning on each other's ranches about practices, about results, about quality. And now we're opening that community up to our consumers. And so every 6 months we meet. In the spring, it's on the ranches, and in the fall, I drag them into the city, which they all grumble about. And we talk to our buyers, and this year in particular, we talk to policymakers, we talk to investors. And it's this really amazing, and for me, incredibly rewarding opportunity for people that on the surface look very different to organize around the thing that they all have in common, which is this: everybody can imagine a future where soil is the center of the food system instead of a victim of it. And that's a really powerful organizing principle. So this year in particular, we had the member of Congress that represents Portland, the most liberal member in Oregon, speaking with this group of ranchers about soil, and everybody was on the same page. We had one of our fast casual clients launch a burger called the No. 6 burger, which is a 100% grass-fed beef burger with our beef and local grains and a local cheese. And they call it the No. 6 because it is, carbon is the sixth element in the periodic table. So they're using their marketing dollars to talk about soil to their consumers and talk about the importance of sequestering carbon through agricultural practices. So I would say, there are a lot of people that can, these practices work, right? I think we've heard that over and over again. When you focus on soil health, everything else follows. And for me, it wasn't that simple. I feel like over and over again we see that building soil is a long, arduous process, and even though it works, you are literally changing the ground underneath your feet. And there are so many surprises that come up and challenges, and I see a lot of people get discouraged and feel like a failure when they have challenges, and they're doing it counter to everyone else in their community. And so I feel like there are two key parts at least for my efforts, and one is building a reliable market, or ideally having a premium to support these practices, but definitely having a reliable market that is connected to the value system. And the second is having a group of people that are trying to do the same thing that you can fall back on. And that, I think, can help weather the storm in a lot of ways, and it's just been an incredibly rewarding process for me as a producer, which makes up for spending a little less time on the ranch. I think we're going to move on to questions now, because there's a lot of content to cover.
So I guess my question is for all three of you. How did you, or have you, especially for Grant and Don, got your neighbors to join in, or how do you convince them to start this community?
We're really struggling with that, but it is starting. So we've shown them our supposed path for 12 plus years, And we do have people that I can call neighbors that are within 15 miles of us starting. So it's, hopefully we're starting that hub to get it going out.
Our group is, we didn't start with our neighbors. That would have taken a long time. Our group is connected through this market, but they're dispersed. And so that's where we started.
Hi, thank you all for your presentations. It was fun, and it's amazing the soil you're growing. I'm curious about the human health connection and whether you guys are working with nutritionists in your community, Weston Price, anything to open that conversation to see, to attract customers if nothing else.
I guess I'll take a shot at this first. No, we're not working with anybody like that. But we are working with General Mills. We're 2 hours away from General Mills headquarters. This is where they come to get these ideas. We've been working with them a lot. And just a comment on human health is, I haven't had a chance to ever go with our meat trailer to sell product that we raise on our farm, but the kids do. And it's so fun talking to the kids when they come home. It's like, who'd you meet today? Who'd you meet today? And Cody, he's kind of a quiet guy, but he'll come and he'll say, well, I just met a mom in this community that they basically gave up on meat altogether. And I explained to her that there's no additives to this. It's a pure, wholesome product. And she bought some. And the next week, I just can't wait to talk to him when he gets back, because he's got or several customers now that don't have enough storage for meat, but they're paying him in advance. Store it for us, please, just in case we miss you when you're in town. So the kids are seeing it with the people they're in contact with that aren't having allergic reactions to what they were buying on the store shelf, which I think is just a great story.
Our most diehard customers are people that honestly have had human health crises, right? They have had some sort of health crisis that has caused them to do a deep dive on nutrition and learn some of the things that Fred Provenza was talking about this morning about, what does full nutrition look like? And so we aren't doing a lot of work to put that information out there. At this point, people are largely coming to us. We're responding to them. We have people saying, we want an organ meat blend because we want to have more organ meats in our diet. We want higher fat blends. So I think that's kind of where we are today is we're letting people who are out there doing the research, who are affiliated with either the paleo movement or the keto movement or the Weston Price Foundation come to us and tell us what they need. Oh my gosh, bone sales, bone broth. Yeah.
How do you address the cultural divide that may occur between you and your neighbors who may feel threatened by what you're doing? Do you understand what I'm saying? They probably don't understand what you're doing, and they're invested in another type of agriculture, and you're moving away from that. So how do you address that cultural divide?
So we have an elevator 2 miles away from our farm. And that picture that we showed where the water was standing in the field and ours had green on it, that person goes and sits at that elevator, and sometimes we call it adult daycare. And so the elevator operator manager, he listens to everything that that we talk about. And usually when we're there, nobody else is there because then they have to stop talking about us. But anyway, so we've been talking to this manager, and this manager started kind of poking at our neighbor verbally, just saying, well, Grant and Don are doing this. And the neighbor was saying, well, they're out of their minds. It's never going to work. It won't work, on my land. He's right across the fence, so why wouldn't it? So anyway, Grant had a short conversation with him one day, and after that conversation ended, the manager kept poking at him. And he finally got really mad and red in the face, and he says, well, I'm going to go home, and I'm going to stick a probe 6 feet in the ground and prove you guys all wrong. He was going to try to prove that he has no compaction, that he has rainfall infiltration. And before he did the stupid thing and tried to do that, he went online and started doing some research. And it started making sense to him. And he finally went to, or did he come to you? Did he admit it to you?
No.
I don't remember.
Conservation.
Oh yeah, to the Soil and Water Conservation District person that he had an 20-minute argument with. He finally admitted to her that he was going to start trying maybe a little bit on a little bit of his land. So, he's one of those that would come into our yard and ask questions, drive away, and we'd never see him again. I don't think our neighbors feel threatened. I think they think we're batshit crazy, to be honest with you.
But I personally, I believe that, like where we are in row crop country, our input suppliers feel threatened. It's huge, and we're seeing it. Southeastern Minnesota is really seeing it bad. That we'll hold a soil health day, a pasture walk. Immediately there will be rebuttals to whatever was talked about at that in the media somewhere that goes to the farmers. And the sad part is, in agriculture, especially in row crop agriculture, 85 to 90% of the decisions we make on our farms, we make by what our input supplier tells us to do. We gotta quit listening to the people taking the money out of our pocket. We have a battle with that, but we have a better relationship with NRCS. We've got a very good state conservationist that's really helping us out in our state.
But your county agent isn't curious?
We don't have county agents anymore in Minnesota. There we have region agents, and I don't even know where our local one is.